Every day's Christmas.
Pretty much. Well, I grew up without Christmas, so I'm making up for lost time.
Yes. We might as well start. Welcome everyone back to Open Up with Lockie, episode 233 with Courtney Wilder, who I met on Clubhouse, like randomly, and you're right here in Perth, and friends with a friend of mine, which is crazy. But I guess I gravitated to you because you were someone who just showed up so powerfully. It just felt so authentic and grounded. And I'm sure in Clubhouse you've come across rooms and people who are speaking who you're just like, ugh. And that was the opposite. That was the opposite of you. And I felt completely safe, like in your space, in a room with you, speaking with you or listening to you speak. And so that just led to us chatting off of Clubhouse and has led to this. And like, I'm very grateful for your time, knowing that you've got bubs, but I'm grateful for the way that you showed up too. And you interviewed me in that interview. That felt really, really organic, really heart-centered, really aligned, really grounded. And I'm just looking forward to this, especially when we're talking beforehand about intuition and helping people realize their own magic, which I feel is something that you would definitely help someone do.
Oh, thank you so much. Yeah, it's been so beautiful to get to know you and connect with you. And I think I always love Clubhouse and social media for that. It's actually really funny. Someone who is now one of my best friends, we're very close and have done a lot of work together as well, co-collaborated on events. I met her on Instagram, again, didn't think she was in Perth. And then it turns out she literally lives 10 minutes away from me. And I was like, oh, okay. I think we have this idea that these people that are really inspiring and doing the work that either we want to do or we are doing, we're like, for me, I'm like, they can't be in Rockingham. And then I'm like, oh, actually, they are. I'm so busy listening to podcasts by people in America, and really, like, in my backyard is these people that are just as inspiring and as empowering. So
shout out Rockingham.
Totally.
Okay. First question is, can you describe the way you view yourself, either as a woman or human?
Yeah, just getting right in there. How I view myself, I would say it changes. It changes with the day. There are some times where I view myself as that really kind, really gentle, really nurturing healer who just wants to show up as the balm for the world and just make everybody feel safe and nurtured. And then there's times where I am, the sassy one who is very quick-witted, who is very shady, who always loves a laugh, who is, the wildest one of the friend group. And I love that I have that polarity, and I love seeing that polarity in everyone else, because I don't think as humans we are ever one thing. And I think especially with social media, we have a tendency to put people in boxes. This person is spiritual, therefore that is their entire identity. And it's like when people meet me and they get to know me a bit, and straight away they're like, oh, so you must be vegan. And I'm like, no, but not that there's anything wrong with being vegan or not being vegan, but it's like the identity that they create for me just from the snippet of social media. And then when they meet me, they're like, oh, okay, you're actually like really sassy and silly. And I'm like, yeah, I can be all things.
I love that. Which is like, it's probably a good context around what we're talking into or speaking into with intuition, like trusting yourself, which is like in essence just surrendering to what's coming up for you. But I want to give people a little bit of context around you and what you've been through throughout your life, whatever comes up for you, what feels most alive to speak into, context as to how you become the person that you are now.
Absolutely. So I grew up as a Jehovah's Witness. For those of you that don't know, it's a Christian, air quotes, religion. that they're the door knockers. They're the people that come and knock on your door on the Saturday and the Sunday, and you pretend that you're not home and we can see that you're there. Or you open the door and you're like, not interested, and shut it again. So I grew up as a Jehovah's Witness, as a daughter of an elder. An elder, I guess, would be like a priest in another religion. It is a very, very fear-based belief, rooted in very deep sexism. The woman must be always in subjection to man. The most that we can do is door knocking. It's not like we can be preachers or anything like that, like elders or anything like that. And I was like, had constantly ingrained in me that, you know, I was the weaker vessel. I should be in subjection to man. Man should be in subjection to Jesus. Jesus in subjection to God. So pretty much from a young age, you have it drilled into you. Women down here, men up here. And also, it's very judgmental. They disfellowship people. So what that means, if you no longer believe or if you do something that is against one of their laws, you get kicked out and you are to be treated as though you were dead. Nobody speaks to you. Your own family turns their back on you. You are shunned quite heavily. And that's one of their like standard well-known practices. So instead of having these really beautiful connected relationships with people, you end up forming relationships where instantly you can just turn your back on and stop talking to somebody. And even like you see that in marriages, you know, you have husbands and wives like dobbing on each other to the elders because their partner has done something incorrectly. So you live in this society where you're always in fear of either somebody finding out you've done something wrong or offending somebody and then being shunned and having no one speak to you. And then I was a childhood victim of sexual abuse at 10 years old and suppressed that very heavily, didn't tell anybody about that until I was 14, when I very much struggled with my mental health and very much internally was struggling with my mental health, and was that typical case of a teenager of nobody realizes that they're struggling until they wind up in hospital from trying to take their own life. And then suddenly everybody is in this panic mode, trying to figure out what was the cause and what do we do from here. I did get a bit of help then. I saw a psychologist, but I think that they couldn't get really to the bottom of it. Understandably, there was so much going on. They just thought, oh, okay, as soon as the realization of sexual abuse came out, they were like, okay, done. That must be the cause of it. All good now. We'll just support her with that. So I was misdiagnosed with depression. And then I ran away from home when I was 16 because I wanted to have sex. And I couldn't within the religion I was in. So that for me, I needed that as part of my healing journey. I needed for myself, I needed a sexual experience where I chose that sexual experience because I wanted it, because I desired it, not because it was, you know, taken from me or something that somebody else chose for me. And the only way I could seemingly have that for myself was to run away from home. So I ran away from home into a relationship with an older guy. He was 21. I was literally 3 days into being 16, and then ran into a domestic violence relationship. So all of this had happened at quite a young age. And then I had the whole, how could I possibly leave this situation? Because I've left my whole family, I've left my whole religion, I'd left everything I've known to go into this relationship. So I can't leave it. I have to stay. I have to stay because, you know, is it pride, shame of what will everybody think now if I go back? And also the part of me that's like, if the only choice I have is to go back to my family, and if I go back to my family, they're going to make me be a Jehovah's Witness again. And I know that that's not my truth.
Well, that's like another layer of, or another block to get yourself out of that relationship that a lot of people won't have. Obviously, the shame of being in a relationship like that, whether it's domestic violence or like mental abuse, there's that level of shame for actually allowing yourself to stay in it. There's the worry around what people are gonna think, the judgment aspect, but then to have that as well, it's huge. How did you eventually give yourself permission to leave that relationship?
This is going to come completely left field, but I cheated on him. And by cheating on him, I realized that I didn't love him, that I was only staying out of fear, that the desire that I once had for the relationship was completely gone, and that I was worthy of love and of adoration, which this one night stand with this person gave me. So I decided to come clean. After that had happened, he was violent with me again, and I was covered in bruises. And I'd met the guy that I had cheated with at work. I was the manager of Boost Juice at the time. They used to come and get a Boost Juice every day. And he saw me and he's like, "How are you?" And I was like, he could see the bruises on me, and he's like, "Oh my God, did your partner find out?" And I was just like, "No." And he's like, and I'm like, "No, this is just what happens." And he's like shock and horror over that, you know, wasn't caused by anything. It was just the reality of it. It sort of made me realize, like, yeah, what am I doing? Like, what am I doing? So I was open. I told my sister and my cousin literally came while he was at work, packed up all my things, moved me into her house. My parents had moved to South Australia at that time. So then, like, I moved to South Australia very closely after. So it was a bit of a whirlwind of a week of me finally admitting what was happening and then moving across to the other side of the country to get out.
What, as someone who was brought up, I guess, in Jehovah's Witness and then cheating on a partner, how did you give yourself permission to open up about actually cheating? Because for a lot of people, they spend a lot of their lives and years upon years trying to hide the fact that they've actually done something like that.
Absolutely. I think because, and while I'm not like, everybody go cheat on your partner, definitely
not saying that either.
Definitely not. But I think for myself at that point in time, as a 16-year-old, almost 17-year-old in the situation that I was in, I realized that, again, this is the second time in my life now that by me choosing my sexuality was the key point of changing my life. So how could I then have shame around what I have done? Whereas the way that I saw it, by choosing to cheat in that moment, I saved myself from staying in a relationship that was so damaged to every part of me. And while, again, there was probably a better way that I could have gone around it, but it was what I needed at the time to reclaim my power.
Well, and how did that go from there being someone who, I guess, in the hierarchy was below God, Jesus, and men? What did that transition look like, going from a place of being sexually abused, being diagnosed with depression, and then being in a domestic violence relationship? What did that transition look like, going from that place, having that upbringing, to this position now where you're helping people and you seem so confident within yourself and, you know, for all intents and purposes, seem like someone who genuinely trusts and loves themselves?
Well, it's like the pendulum. So I had to swing so far back into that life, and then I had to swim the other way. So I went from, you know, church girl, perfect, like elder's daughter, to far into hypersexuality. So after that experience, I became very hypersexual. I didn't want relationships. I would just, you know, have sex with men. Became a stripper at 17. Really sort of went into that partying life. My motto of life became, you have to try everything at least once because you might not like it the first time. I just really got into just opening myself up to every experience, and the typical self-medication that often comes before a bipolar diagnosis coming, of, you know, getting heavily into drugs, into alcohol, doing whatever I can to soothe my own wounds. And then, you know, quickly realized my father passed away when I was 17, and it shattered me completely. My dad was always my absolute best friend. And then not having that person to sort of ground and to talk to and bounce ideas off. I got lost for a while, went back to the religion, Tried my hardest to be the perfect person again, be the perfect girl, be worthy of love, because I didn't find that going to the other extreme of, you know, my wild life, which was I loved, but didn't bring happiness and joy. And then went back to the religion, and then again, that didn't work. Obviously, that didn't work out either, because I was, again, pushing that intuition down, pushing that truth down. Every fiber of my being knew that I did not believe it. I did not believe it. There were so many falters that I had, you know, at a very young age. I had the knowing that my grandfather was going to die the day he died. And then, you know, with the beliefs, I was always told, I was thinking, you know, this 6-year-old girl was thinking, oh my gosh, I've got a demon inside me. Don't tell anyone, because any spiritual practices are to do with demons. So there was that constant suppression. And then especially, I think, after you lose someone and you do have a really strong intuitive feel, I could feel my dad. I could feel that I could talk to him. I could feel his presence. All these things would happen, but I'm like, this is not what the religion that I'm in teaches. So it's that suppression, until it got to the point where everything blew up. I tried to take my own life again. And then I had that realization that I'm in the exact same place that 16-year-old me was in. I'm in an abusive relationship. This time it's in an abusive relationship of a religion, of religious beliefs. I'm suppressing my truth. I'm restricting myself, and I want to die. I have to change this time. And this time it can't be making a change because I'm rebelling, so I'm swinging too far. This time it has to be, I'm making a change because it feels good, because I need to choose to be alive. At that time, my sister-in-law was pregnant with my nephew. And there's a song by, oh gosh, I think it's by Bright Eyes, and it's called No Lies, Just Love. And it's a song that I think he wrote to his nephew that was due to be born. And it's about awaiting the arrival of this baby and struggling so much with not wanting to be alive, but choosing to be alive, because when this fresh baby comes out and they're going to look at you with their eyes, they're going to see no lies, just love. And I would listen to that song on repeat and be like, no, I need to sort myself out, because we have a new member coming into this family, and I don't want them to grow up thinking that when they're having a hard time being like, oh, it's okay, I can just kill myself like my auntie Courtney did. And that became such a crux of me finding a psychologist, and then through working with a psychologist, unpacking, you know, years and years of trauma, and realizing that a lot of the decisions I had made were from rebelling. But then when I came back to my truth, I was like, actually, I want my life to look like this, and I want my life to feel like this, which I think was the biggest change in everything, really.
I love that. Is that where you would start with someone who's coming on board with you as a client?
Absolutely. So when somebody comes on board, usually what will happen is I'll sit with them and I'll get them to just drop back into their body and drop back into feeling. And what does it feel like when you trust yourself? What does it feel like when you get a full body yes, but also when you get a full body no? Because usually the work when I'm first working with my clients is learning how to set boundaries from an authentic place, not from a place of I should set a boundary here. It's from a place of, you know, my body is telling me to set a boundary here. And once you can get into that place of just learning what the physical, emotional, mental, spiritual yeses and nos are, then we can build on top of that. Intuition is a muscle, and like any muscle, it needs to be exercised. But the life that we all lead, there's not really much space and time for that muscle to be worked, for that muscle to be flexed. You think it starts young at school. We're told when to go to the toilet. We're told when to eat our food. We're told when we need to do exactly what we need to do. So we just end up ignoring all those cues that our intuition gives us, that our body gives us. So then you have adults that, you know, come to people like me and be like, I need to work on this. And that's why I always say, it's not going to be an overnight thing. You've had years suppressing it. So now we're going to build it up, but also we're going to release any shame or guilt and the times when you don't listen to your body. Intuition, that first needs to go out the window, so that you can surrender to trusting yourself.
That's amazing. When you spoke into boundaries, how important is a change of environment for like that transition from someone who isn't in touch with their intuition or doesn't trust how they feel about making a decision? How important is environment? And then I guess how would someone go about changing that environment in a respectful way through boundaries?
Hmm. It's pretty important, but also I think that when you start this work, it's also really potent not to make any rash decisions or try to change your environment straight away, because then also sometimes an environment, like putting it on the environment, can be a bit of an excuse.
Yeah.
Because we can be the creators of our own environment. So if we're doing the work and we go, oh, actually, this person's doing this, or I'm in this job, or this, all this needs to change. First off, I'm like, no. First off, you need to sit with yourself. If something doesn't feel right at the time, yes, speak to it. But also, if you try and just dramatically remove yourself, chances are you're going to recreate that same environment because you haven't done the work on healing the original wound. So you're just going to end up re-piercing yourself in a different situation in a different way. So first it needs to do some of that original healing of the wound. Take some time to really get to see your environment, because first the environment is going to be a trigger. And then once you get deeper with it, you're going to be like, oh, okay, actually, maybe I don't need to change everything. I just need to set a firm boundary. And by doing that, usually what ends up happening is your environment starts to change. The relationships that I have with the people in my life have now dramatically changed. It's not like I don't have any of the people in my life that I had back in all of those stages, but our relationship has changed over time. And through me permissioning myself to trust myself and trust my intuition, that has created also healing in other people's lives, not from me being like, you need to do this, you need to heal, look at all the work I'm doing. But it's more than being like, okay, we remember what Courtney was like before she started this work, and now we see her now. Maybe I should ask her about what she's doing, because I also want to live a life that I feel really lit up, and I also feel really grounded in myself.
I love that. And that's something that seems to come up quite a lot is people who are doing the work, say someone is delving into the space and they're getting better at trusting their intuition, come across so many people who find themselves wanting to pull people along with them. And when you try and pull someone along with you, you just create resistance. People then like harbor resentment for you wanting to, like, bunny air quotes, fix them. And nobody likes being forced to change. That's why COVID is such a problem, and that's why lockdowns are such an issue, is because nobody likes being forced into changing their daily routine. And it's just going to be even worse when you're trying to force someone to change like deep embedded unconscious behavior.
And what I love about humans is that what works for me is not going to work for you. And we all go through our journeys, like finding what we need in different ways. Like for me, it was like spirituality, claiming my intuition that really helped me. But for somebody else, it could be, starting to have a relationship with their body, moving their body every day, eating healthy every day. For somebody else, it's going down the medical route completely, finding a really great psychologist, finding really great medication to support them and doing the work, doing the talk therapy so they can get through. And I think that we need to hold a lot more compassion for people on their journeys, because again, we're like, no, this worked for me, therefore it should work for everyone else. This is the way you need to do it. But so often the people in our lives are so different to us that we can't really try and force them to fix them, because maybe their journey is to end up where we are, but to go about it a completely different way. So while we can be like, hey, by my example, this is what worked for me. Also, you need to give people, empower people to use their own intuition as well. To be like, hey, I've noticed that you keep playing out this cycle. Are you open to seeing it from a different perspective, or open to hearing what I have to say? And then maybe talk them through, but then ask them, like, what do you feel you need in this? How do you feel you need support? Do you want me to help you with going to the doctors to get a mental health care plan? Do you want me to help you with finding someone who can, create an exercise program or go for walks with you? Do you want me to find you someone that you can do some healing work with? Instead of being like, you need to go down this avenue, it's again, empowering others to use their intuition the way that you use your intuition.
I love that. Just showing up powerfully and trusting that it'll impact your environment. It's so good. And I guess the reason I asked about boundaries is because I see a lot of people, like you said, get to a position where they're wanting to create these boundaries, but it's coming from a place of actually avoiding having hard conversations with people, like actually setting healthy boundaries. So instead they'll cull the environment or completely transition or change it. And it's coming from a place of that avoidance and then like projecting onto that environment or those people that they're no longer suitable for you.
Exactly. Which in sometimes needed, definitely. I'm not saying don't cut out people from your life, because there are times that you can do the work and you can have the conversations and you can set the boundaries through explaining why a boundary is set. So many people are like, here's my boundary, but they don't explain why a boundary needs to be set. And they forget that that can be some of the most like healing, empowering thing, is explaining why a boundary is being set to somebody. And they're probably going to be triggered at first. They're probably going to be like, are you saying I'm a horrible person? How dare you? But you keep the boundary firm once you've explained to them. And then over time, they're probably going to start to see, oh, okay, I get this now. And when they stop getting their back arched so much, they'll begin to understand. And then they may choose to do something about it and may choose to change. But then if they don't, if they just keep hitting that boundary hard, keep trying to push, then you go, look, I've set this boundary. You keep trying to push your way over it. Now I think it's time for us to disconnect the relationship, or we need to take some more space. If you feel later down the track that you can respect that boundary, then I'd love to connect with you again. But at this point in time, with the way you and I both are, it's not the healthiest for either of us to keep this connection.
Love that. You spoke about spirituality too, and like connecting to that. What has that looked like for you, going from someone who was embedded in that culture, in that religion, I guess with a certain perspective or view of spirituality, and then transitioning over into what it is that you do now?
Absolutely. So growing up before, my religious beliefs, it was always like getting information externally. I had to be told what to believe. You have 3 meetings a week. You go to church 3 times a week, wow, plus going out door to door. So you're just constantly being re-indoctrinated. Even when you're not at church, almost every night you're having to do study in preparation for church. So every single day you're doing something, but reading words from somebody else. This is what you should believe. This is our interpretation of the Bible. And then now with my spiritual practice, it's myself first. What's my relationship to divine? What is my intuition telling me? What is my body telling me? What is my own faith telling me? So it's really having to break those external chains that you always have to be asking somebody else, or always having to have somebody else show up. I think I've said to you before that when I'm working with my clients, I want to get to the point where they don't need me anymore. And that is just like the creation of my upbringing. I never want to be somebody that's telling other people what they have to do, what they need to do. And I don't want to be anybody's feel-good drug that they're constantly having to get topped up by to hold their own beliefs.
You don't want to start the Wilder cult?
Oh my gosh, no. No. I'm like, guys, I'm human. We're all human. Please don't put me on a pedestal. I should not be on there at all. Because we are all our own gurus. We are all our own guides. This year, 2021, when we work in numerology and tarot medicine, which is what I do, it's a 5-year. In the tarot, that's the Hierophant. And the message of the Hierophant, so for me, the message of 2021 that we're all going through is you are your own guru, you are your own guide. Shed away those external beliefs, those internal ancestral beliefs, societal beliefs that you are holding on to, that when you feel into yourself, it does not feel true. It does not align with your personal truth. So it's clearing those away to trust yourself, trust your inner guidance, and be that leader, that healer for yourself.
I love that. And With tarot and numerology and astrology, being someone in that space or being someone who is a client of a coach in that space, that in itself takes a whole lot of trust and faith and surrender, right? Because you
100%.
you don't actually know, you're just trusting and believing that this is going to impact you in this way. How have you gone in that practice, or how did you get into tarot and numerology, astrology, and what has been the benefit, or what have you seen play out for you?
Yeah, so I got into this all, like starting my business Seeking Wilder, when my sister passed away just over 4 years ago. So losing my sister was earth shattering for me, in the sense of I just went back into that victim mentality and I wanted to stay there. Everything that had happened to my life, it was like almost all of the trauma, losing my dad, the childhood trauma, everything, my best friend passing away, all of this sort of stuff just all came up to the surface. And I was like, you know what? Life too hard. I'm going to stay alive because I need to, because how could my family cope with another person passing away? But I'm going to be really angry about that. Like there was a lot of anger there, almost, that how dare my sister be the one to pass away and to leave me here to have to live with all of this, like not fair at all. And I was seeing my psychologist. I went back onto antipsychotics. By that stage, I've been seeing a psychologist since I was 21, was diagnosed formally with bipolar PTSD, which helped a lot in getting the help that I needed. But I was like, you know what? I was almost doing the bare minimum. I was like, I'm seeing my psychologist again. I've gone on medication. I feel like nobody can expect any more of me. But it was my older sister that saw this sort of drowning that I was doing, this flailing that I was doing. And she was like, Courtney, you need to go and see this healer. Go and see this healer. And I'd be like, yeah, send me the number. And then she'd see me like a month later and she's like, Courtney, I really think that you should go and see this healer. I'm like, yeah, send me the number. I think she sent me the number, no joke, maybe about 5 times. And then it got to the point where I'm like, okay, I can't keep living like this. This really isn't serving me. Fine, I'll find this number and I'll go. I remember I went, and it had been a really stressful day at work. And I rocked up at this place, which was like in the middle of an industrial place. It was it was that whole like weird situation. It was like starting to get dark. I walk up to this place. It's in like an industrial area in Kwinana. But then when you get there, you walk in and like everything was mosaics, and it was like walking into this like oasis. And I was like, okay, all right, yep, let's do this. And I get down on the table, and I had some of the most monumental shifts of my life. Work that I guess I'd laid the groundwork for in the years of therapy, but it was almost having somebody hold me in that sort of energetic way. All of these things began to shift. And it was like I sat up at that table and I just felt like the fog was gone from my mind. And then I found out that they did a meditation group and they were doing it like the next night. So I went and I was in that meditation group. He was trying to guide me through a meditation, but all I was seeing was tarot cards. And I didn't know anything about tarot at that time. Would go and get readings, and I was that typical skeptical person, arms folded, that asked me like if I had a question. I'd be like, well, you tell me. And now I get those clients and I'm like, this is karma. But I went after the session and I said to him, look, I know you were telling me to go to this forest or whatever it was, but all I could see was these 3 cards. There were 2 cards that I could see and they looked like this, and the third one wouldn't turn over. And from that, he gave me a reading for what was going on exactly in my life. Nothing that I told him about. It was stuff to do with work. And I had this mind-blowing thing that I was like, okay, oh my God, what is this? What is this? And then they recommended that I learn to read tarot. So the next week I learned to read tarot. The week after that, I did my Reiki 1. Again, everything that I've done in my spiritual practice has been for, quote unquote, selfish reasons. It's all been for my own healing. I never wanted to do this work. All I wanted to do was do the healing. But once I started doing it, I'd work on friends and family to practice and to get my skills up. And then they started making like having life-changing things happen, and their family and friends started asking them what they were doing. So then they started asking, who did you do this with? Can we pay her to do it for us? And then I think maybe it was like a month after I learned to read tarot, I was reading professionally in a store. And then I think it was like 6 months later that maybe 6 months or 9 months later that I quit my job and was full-time doing Reiki, doing tarot, then learned astrology and started doing astrology readings as well. So it happened very fast. But again, I think it was, now I look back, it was what I was always, supposed to wind up doing, and it just felt really great. But because I, at that point, made the decision to start making decisions and doing things that feel good and following that things changed really rapidly for me.
I love that. And I think I was going to ask you about processing trauma so you aren't compelled to show up based off of what's happening like behind the scenes or unconsciously or subconsciously. But it sounds like you just did a lot of the work in terms of the therapy, the psych, being on those meds that help those imbalances, and then doing the healing for yourself through Reiki and going to see an energy healer. And I think that's a real important part of being in this space. And a lot of people I'm seeing try to spiritually bypass their own healing and go into a space of serving. And that's what I wanted to ask you. It was one of the questions, but you pretty much just spelled it all out.
Yeah. Well, you can only take your clients as far as you're willing to go. So if you are suppressing your own trauma, choosing to not to do the work as well, that's as far as you're going to be able to take your clients. So that's why for me, like, spiritual hygiene or spiritual cleanliness, whatever you want to say, it is so important to me. Like, it's so important for me to do the work, because I also think, how can I ask my clients to show up in that way if I myself am choosing to suppress things and not do the work, and to not do the, make those shifts and make those changes. And for me, holistic healthcare means holistic healthcare. It means hitting it physically, hitting it medically if needed, doing the spiritual work, doing the emotional work, doing the physical work. For me, it's never worked to do one path, because many times I'm like, I'm just going to do this one thing, and then eventually I feel like I'm getting swallowed up. Whereas once I started spreading it out, supporting, it's almost like trying to balance a table on one leg. If somebody starts, if the environment starts shaking that leg, your table's going to topple over. But if you have like 5-6 legs under that table supporting you in different ways, if the environment starts shaking it, that table's not going to go anywhere. So that's why I'm like, don't just go one thing. Don't think that I'm your feel-good drug, because you also need other things to support you to, get that stable outcome that you're looking for.
I love that. One thing I wanted to ask about, which is a little bit left field, you spoke about door knocking. What were some of the lessons from door knocking? Because that, for a lot of people, like public speaking, would be a huge, huge fear, just because you have to articulate yourself, you have to speak, you have to create a connection from nothing, and there's that potential for rejection, or highly likely that you're going to be rejected.
That you're going to get the door slammed in your face. If I'm going to go like silver lining my experience growing up, I am so grateful for the lessons that I learned in public speaking. So at maybe 6 years of age, I was giving talks on stage in front of over 150 people, however many was in the congregation at the time. Every single meeting, my parents would encourage me to put my hand up, grab the microphone, give an answer, speak. So from a young age, it sort of eradicated that fear of public speaking, because the fear of somebody think you're doing, being a bad girl was worse than the fear of public speaking. And that door knocking, you had to learn how to have blind faith in yourself, and also really not care what people thought of you, really not care. And the biggest lesson, I guess, that I learned is it's them, not me. So when it's rejection, that's not on me. They're not rejecting me. They're making this choice to reject it for themselves because whatever the reason is. And I guess that's carried into my own business as well, that if, there's ever rejection, well, I'm like, yeah, that's not on them. That's on them. It's probably, this doesn't suit them for something. It's not because they're not choosing me. It's just that they're choosing their own beliefs, which has been really potent and powerful, but it's also given me the opportunities, to speak at events where there's like 250 people there and being like, yep, here, I'm just going to show up, bare my heart to you, tell you all my story, and that's okay.
Where does that belief or that lens or that perspective come from when somebody says no, to not take that on personally? Because I don't feel that's a common perspective.
Definitely. I think it comes through doing a lot of work on what do you emotionally connect rejection to? When you breathe into rejection, when you feel into it, where is it tied to in your body? Where do you hold it? And when you think of rejection, what does it connect onto? So it's like, trauma, I always say it acts as a magnet. So if we're not doing the work, all those little things that make us feel the same way is going to get attracted to that, and it's going to become bigger and bigger and bigger. So if you have never done any work on your uncomfortability with rejection, a slight rejection, which is, again, probably nothing to do with you, is going to trigger a time maybe from when you were young that you felt deeply rejected. So you're responding to it in that way. Whereas, again, if you go back and heal that original wound, that original place, it gets to the point where you're kind of like, yeah, that sucked, but obviously they're not for me, I'm not for them. And I think now doing the work that I only really want to work with people who are my people, who are for me, who we can be massive advocates for each other. We're going to be the biggest cheerleaders for each other. I'm going to, support them in the way that they need, and they're going to, receive that support from me openly. So if I'm rejected in that, then I'm like, fantastic. I'd rather be rejected now than be 3 months, 6 months into our relationship and me find that they're not doing any of the work that I'm encouraging them to do because we're so not aligned in the way that we're showing up.
I love that. And if you're someone who is coming from that place of avoiding rejection, for the most part, you'll probably look to mold yourself or mold your offering or mold the way that you show up to make sure that you aren't rejected. And then, you get the couple months in and you realize, oh shit, this really isn't aligned for me. I don't know why I feel like this is just yuck. And then you have to face it at some point anyway. So it is just so much easier to face it on the front end. Let's talk about your offering, what it is that you actually do, and how people can get in touch with you.
Yeah, absolutely. So I do a few different things, of course. I love to dabble into everything, but I would say, look, my style and my message is, it's kind of like spirituality for the unspiritual, or practical spirituality. I want to empower people to use these esoteric tools in a way that they can use them daily, they can use them easily, and they can use them in a practical way to reconnect with their own intuition, to bring about abundance and alignment with their own life. So I have some clients who have 7-figure businesses in things that you would never imagine, that behind the scenes they're getting work from an intuitive coach, and we're looking at their business's astrological birth chart and we're diving into it because it's so, white collar or blue collar sort of businesses. But everybody can use these tools. Everybody is intuitive, especially when you see people at like the top of their game, top of their game. It can be quite lonely up there because they can't really talk to their peers. They can't talk to their employees about what's going on. And when they have that almost crisis of self, which we all go through, we're human, they need somebody to just support them in guiding them back to their intuition so they can make the decisions, especially in those cases that, are quite high pressure decisions that they need to make. So to work with me, I do one-on-one intuitive coaching sessions. We can dive into your birth chart, and then we can also decode your business's birth chart, because what people don't realize, especially entrepreneurs, They blend their identity with being a business and their business owner, and they forget that it's two separate things. We are showing up with our own energies, our own wounding, our own sense of abundance, and our business is asking us to show up in its own way as well. So it can be really good for people to separate the two and to work with both. I also teach tarot and teach astrology. So if you head over to seekingwilder.com or any of my socials, which are all Seeking Wilder, you can come to one of my classes and learn to do it for yourself as well. Because as I said, everybody's intuitive. Everybody is a tarot reader. But I also have my Soul Seeker subscription, which I am so excited about. That is starting this month. So if you sign up before the 20th of March for the start of Aries season, which is the start of the solar astrological cycle, you will get a really juicy email that's going to come out with sound healings, meditations, insights into how this current astrological cycle matches with your own birth chart, what it's highlighting for you personally, where you need to focus your attention on. And I split that. So my whole thing is accessibility. So there are 3 tiers of payment. There is the standard payment. There is a community rate. So people who feel like they are at need can still receive the juiciness. And you don't have to apply for that at all. It's completely, if you feel that you can't commit to $20 a month, and I know I have been there, then go with the community rate. And that's why I created the abundance rate. So if people want to work with their relationship with receiving to flowing that abundance energy through them out into the community, they can sign up for that, and that supports the people in the community rate as well.
That's amazing. That's so cool. And it was you who held the tarot workshop?
Yes.
That was pretty cool. That's the first time I ever seen anything like it. And I was like, oh my God, is tarot actually like this popular? I had no idea.
It's very popular. It's very, very popular. So I have been teaching tarot, gosh, for a while now, a couple of years now. And I usually do a workshop maybe every 1 or 2 months, and they always sell out. And I love it. I love teaching tarot. And my way of reading tarot, it's like I eradicate all of that fear-based belief that goes out the window, and it's more a soul-centered, intuitive approach, and it's the medicine. I posted like a little reel yesterday about what I do if those intrusive, anxious thoughts pop up. And one of the things I do is tarot anchoring, which you pull a card out. Maybe it's a strength card or whatever you need to at that time, and you place it somewhere where you can see it every day and draw on that message and draw on that strength. I also run a workshop that's called Tarot for the Erotic Soul. So there's so many different ways that we can connect with tarot, that we can connect with astrology, that, you know, we're putting it in this pigeonhole of you're just going to pull cards for the future, when I'm like, actually, it's more about the present. It's all about the message of what do you need right now in this moment, rather than looking to the past or looking to the future.
I love that. I feel like there's so many amazing things that you do, and you have such a like vast knowledge base that it's so hard to cram it into 1 hour. So if you're open to it, we'll have to do a part 2 at some point around like astrology and tarot, like specifically on those, because I feel like that's one of the most interesting parts about all of this.
Yes, I would love that.
Is that side of it, and getting people, I don't know, giving people some sort of insight, especially people like me who haven't really delved into that space.
I would love that.
Crossing the chasm. Thank you for taking time for this. Thank you for getting the sitter so we can do this. I really do appreciate it, and I guess to honor you, not just for your time, but for the way that you show up. Like, I really do believe in you as both a person and as a coach, although I haven't been coached by you, just the way that you show up and the level of trust that I have for you. Like, I have a very keen sense of when someone is full of rubbish, full of shit. I can sense that, and I have a very keen sense of when someone is super genuine, and that's the way I feel about you. That's why I feel really excited about being connected with you and having this opportunity, and then being able to jump on another one with you. It's I'm really grateful to have you in my vortex at the moment. It feels really good.
Thank you so much. Oh, receiving that. That is so beautiful. And yeah, you know how I feel about you. For those of you that don't follow me on social media, I interviewed Lockie on my Instagram. You can check it out on my IGTV, and how I feel he is the embodiment of the King of Cups, which is that leader, that beautiful healer, nurturing energy who just holds that space for other people to do the work. So yeah, go and check that out, because like you just spoke so beautifully from the heart. And I've had people message me who have watched that IGTV and said that they were crying throughout it from the way that you were showing up and speaking. It was so potent and beautiful.
That's so cool. I actually really, really loved that interview. It felt so good.
It was a great time. It was a great time.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.
See you, Queen.
Bye.